The teddy bear's belly was stuffed with divorce papers, mine papers I'd never signed. Never seen, dated 3 months ago with a forged signature so perfect it could have fooled a judge. My daughter Anna stood in the center of our Pacific Heights living room, her 6th birthday crown slipping sideways as she stared at the documents spilling from the torn seam of the brown plush bear my mother had sent from her Napa Valley state. I didn't cry. I didn't call my husband. I smiled at Anna, told her grandma made a silly mistake with the stuffing, and sent her to play with her nanny. Then I locked myself in my walk-in closet and started planning the kind of revenge that would make my mother wish. She'd never taught me how to play chess. My name is Paige Sutton, and until that Saturday afternoon, I thought I knew exactly who I was. Daughter of Senator Victoria Lennox, wife of tech mogul Julian Sutton, mother to the most beautiful 6-year-old in San Francisco, and creative director of my own luxury lifestyle brand that had just landed a spread in Architectural Digest. Our home was 7,000 square feet of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. My closet cost more than most people's cars. I had a personal trainer, a meal prep service, and a calendar color-coded by my assistant. I had control, or at least I thought I did. The thing about control is that it's an illusion. Wealthy people buy and poor people chase. Real power isn't about money, it's about information. And that teddy bear had just handed me the information that my perfect life was a staged photograph. Carefully lit and completely fake. Those divorce papers weren't just forgeries. They were blueprints. My mother had somehow obtained legal documents meant to dissolve my marriage. Documents that detailed asset divisions I'd never agreed to. Custody arrangements that gave Julian primary care of Anna. And a settlement that would leave me with almost nothing despite the prenup I'd actually signed protecting my family. Inheritance. But here's what made my blood run cold enough to freeze champagne. The papers were notarized. They had case numbers. They'd been filed in family court under a judge my mother played tennis with every Thursday. Someone had been building a legal case to erase me from my own life. And they'd been doing it in plain sight while I posted Instagram stories about organic birthday cakes and Montessori parenting. I sat on the floor of my closet, surrounded by Louboutins and Chanels, and let myself have exactly 90 seconds of pure panic. Then I stood up, fixed my hair, and walked downstairs to greet the party guests arriving for Anna's birthday celebration. 20 children from her private school, their parents in Patagonia vests and Hermes scarves. A bubble station, a petting zoo, and a custom 3-tier cake shaped like a castle. I smiled, I laughed. I took photos. And the entire time my mind was 3 moves ahead, planning how to dismantle my mother's life piece by piece. The party ended at 5. By 6, Anna was tucked into bed, exhausted and happy. Clutching a different stuffed animal, one-eyed checked thoroughly for hidden bombs. Julian came home at 7, loose tie and expensive cologne, kissing my cheek and asking if the party was too much. I told him it was perfect. I poured him scotch. I asked about his day. I was the wife he expected, warm and attentive and blissfully unaware that somewhere in this city, people were plotting to take everything I loved. But here's what Julian didn't know about me. What nobody knew, really. Before I became Paige Sutton, before the charity galas and the lifestyle brand, I was Paige Lennox, the daughter who'd watched her mother destroy 3 political rivals, 2 business partners, and 1 investigative journalist who'd gotten too close to a story about campaign finance violations. I'd learned at Victoria's knee how to smile while you're sharpening knives. I just never thought I'd have to use those lessons on family. That night, after Julian fell asleep, I went down to my home office and started digging. My mother had made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated how much I'd learned from watching her. Victoria thought I was the soft one, the creative one. The daughter who'd chosen art over politics and therefore didn't have the stomach for real warfare. She forgot that I'd spent 18 years in her house, watching every move, learning every tactic. She forgot that I was her daughter. The divorce papers had a law firm's name in the footer. Berkshire and Associates, a boutique family law practice in Russian Hill that specialized in discreet dissolutions for high net worth individuals. I'd never heard of them. which meant they were either very new or very exclusive. A quick search showed they'd been around for 6 years. Founded by a woman named Simone Berkshire, who'd made her name representing tech wives in complicated divorces. Interesting. I bookmarked the firm and kept digging. The notary signature on the papers belonged to someone named Ruth Fielding, a mobile notary who advertised services for busy professionals who need documents handled privately and efficiently. Her website showed a pleasant woman in her 50s. Gray hair in a neat bob, testimonials from satisfied clients. I called her number from a burner phone I kept for emergencies. It went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I used a reverse lookup service and found 3 business addresses associated with her name. All in the financial district. But the real gold was in the case number. I'd clerked for a family law judge during law school. Yes, I had a law degree I'd never used. Another thing my mother considered proof of my wasted potential. And I still remembered how to navigate the court's online filing system. I logged in using credentials I'd kept active by occasionally checking cases for friends going through divorces. The case number from the teddy bear papers led me to a file that shouldn't have existed. Petitioner, Julian Sutton. Respondent, Paige Sutton. Filed October 15th, 3 months ago, right after Anna's school year started. My hands were steady as I read through the documents. Julian was petitioning for divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences. He was requesting primary custody of Anna, citing my emotional instability and obsessive focus on public image that creates an unhealthy environment for child development. He was requesting our Pacific Heights home, his company's stock in the Tahoe cabin we'd bought last year. I would get my business, my personal accounts, and a settlement of $2 million generous to most people. Insulting, given that my family trust alone was worth $30 million. The kicker. The papers included a declaration from a therapist I'd never met, Dr. Patricia Wong, stating that she'd been treating me for anxiety and depression for the past year and that, in her professional opinion, I was struggling to maintain stable parenting due to my mental health challenges. The declaration was notarized. It had Dr. Wong's license number. It looked completely legitimate. I sat back in my leather chair and actually laughed. The sound echoed in my empty office, slightly unhinged even to my own ears. This wasn't just a divorce setup. This was a comprehensive character assassination, carefully constructed over months, designed to make me look like an unstable woman who'd lost touch with reality while my successful husband valiantly tried to protect our daughter. It was brilliant. It was thorough. It was exactly the kind of plan my mother would create. But why? That was the question that kept me up until 3 in the morning, scrolling through old texts and emails, looking for clues I'd missed. My mother and I had always had a complicated relationship. She'd wanted me to go into politics. I'd chosen design. She'd wanted me to marry someone with political connections. I'd fallen for a tech entrepreneur. She'd wanted me to be her legacy. I'd wanted to be myself. But we were civil. We did holidays. She sent expensive gifts for Anna. We had lunch once a month at her club, where she'd critique my choices while I smiled and nodded and went home to live my life exactly as I pleased. Or had I? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much my mother had still been pulling strings. She'd introduced me to Julian at one of her fundraisers. She'd suggested the wedding planner who'd created our perfect ceremony. She'd recommended Anna's school, our financial advisor, even our marriage counselor when Julian and I had hit a rough patch. 2 years ago, a counselor whose office happened to be in the same building as Berkshire and Associates. The pieces were clicking together like a puzzle I'd been staring at for years without seeing the picture. My mother hadn't given up on controlling me. She'd just gotten more sophisticated about it. And now, for some reason, she'd decided it was time to remove me from the board entirely. I needed more information. At 7 the next morning, I called my college roommate Tasha, who'd become an investigative journalist for the Chronicle. We met for coffee at a cafe in North Beach, far from my usual haunts. Tasha looked the same as she had at Barclay Sharp Eyes. Vintage leather jacket, the kind of woman who'd rather die than attend a charity luncheon. We hugged, and she immediately said, "You look terrible." "What's wrong?" I told her everything. The teddy bear, the papers, the fake therapy records, the whole constructed nightmare. Tasha listened without interrupting, taking notes in the reporter's notebook she always carried. When I finished, she sat back and said, "Your mother is either trying to protect you from something or destroy you for something. Any idea which?" That was the question, wasn't it? I'd been assuming destruction, but what if Tasha was right? What if this was Victoria's twisted way of saving me from some threat I didn't see coming? My mother had always operated on the principle that the ends justified the means. She'd ruined people's careers to pass legislation she believed would help thousands. She'd exposed affairs and planted stories and manipulated votes, all while sleeping soundly because she believed she was serving a greater good. I don't know, I admitted, but I need to find out before those papers become real. If this case moves forward, if Julian actually files based on those documents, I could lose Anna. Even if I prove they're forgeries, the custody battle alone could take years and cost millions. The accusations would follow me forever. Tasha nodded slowly. Okay, give me 3 days. I'll dig into Berkshire and Associates, the notary, and this therapist. I'll also check if there are any stories brewing about Julian's companies, sometimes divorce filings. Our time to precede scandals, protecting assets before everything hits the fan. In the meantime, you need to act normal. Don't confront your mother. Don't tell Julian. If this is a setup, you can't let anyone know you're onto them. I went home and played the role of perfect wife and mother. I made Anna pancakes shaped like hearts. I approved mock-ups for my spring product line. I confirmed our reservation for Julian's birthday dinner next week at Atelier Cren. I posted a photo on Instagram of Anna's birthday party with a caption about gratitude and childhood magic. 300 likes in an hour. Everyone loved the illusion. But that night, I did something I'd never done before. I checked Julian's phone while he was in the shower. I'd always trusted him completely, never even been tempted to snoop. Now I needed to know if he was part of this or a pawn like me. His texts were exactly what I expected, work conversations. Messages to his college friends about a ski trip. Exchanges with his mother about visiting for Thanksgiving. Nothing suspicious. Nothing about divorce lawyers or custody arrangements. I was about to put the phone back when I saw a text thread with my mother. They'd been communicating regularly several times a week. Messages like "thanks for the advice" and "looking forward to discussing this further." The most recent message, from 2 days before Anna's birthday, said, "Everything is in place. Trust me on this." My husband and my mother, planning something together. Something they'd specifically hidden from me. I put Julian's phone back exactly where I'd found it and climbed into bed. When he came out of the bathroom and kissed me goodnight, I kissed him back and said I loved him. His smile was warm and genuine. He had no idea I was about to burn his whole world down. Tasha called on day 2 with information that made my stomach drop. "Dr. Patricia Wong is real," she said. "Licensed therapist, good reputation, office in Union Square. But here's the interesting part. She's been dead for 4 months. Car accident on Highway 1. Her practice was being wound down by her estate. Someone used her identity to create those therapy records after she died, knowing she couldn't contradict them." "That's fraud," I said quietly. "That's not just a civil matter. That's criminal." "Yeah," Tasha agreed. "Which means whoever's behind this is either incredibly desperate or incredibly confident they won't get caught. I'm still digging on the law firm. Berkshire herself is clean. But her partner, a guy who's not listed on their website, has some interesting connections to political consulting firms. Firms your mother has used. The law firm was connected to my mother's political machine. Of course it was. Victoria never did anything small or simple. If she was going to remove me from my own life, she'd use her entire network to do it. On day 3, just as I was preparing to confront my mother with everything I knew, Tasha called with a piece of information that changed everything. Her voice was shaking slightly, which scared me because Tasha never shook. "Paige, I found something. I need you to sit down." I was already sitting in my office, but I gripped the edge of my desk anyway. "Tell me." Julian's company is about to go public. IPO announcement in 2 weeks. The stock offering is projected to value the company at $8 billion. Julian's shares would be worth approximately $2 billion. That's billion with a B. I let that sink in. $2 billion. 20 times what I thought my husband was worth. 20 times the amount in our prenup. Why didn't he tell me? I don't know, Tasha said carefully. But here's the thing. If you're still married when the IPO happens, California community property law means half of that is yours. $2 billion becomes $1 billion each. But if you're divorced before the IPO, with a settlement based on the company's current private valuation, you'd get maybe $20 million while he walks away with almost $2 billion. Hey, and there it was. The real reason for the fake divorce papers, the character assassination, the careful timeline. This wasn't about custody or my fitness as a mother. This was about money. An almost unimaginable amount of money that Julian and my mother were trying to steal from me before I even knew it existed. There's more, Tasha said, and I could hear her taking a breath. I pulled your mother's recent financial records, don't ask how. She's been taking payments from a consulting company that's actually a shell corporation. When I traced it back, it leads to Julian's CFO. Your mother has been working for your husband. Paige, she's been on his payroll for at least 6 months, helping him figure out how to divorce you before the IPO without triggering the prenup provisions. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Golden Gate Bridge glowing in the afternoon sun. My mother had sold me out. Not for politics or power or some misguided belief that she was protecting me, for money. For a consulting fee that was probably substantial but nowhere near what she was helping Julian steal from me. I need you to get me everything, I told Tasha. Every document, every connection, every payment. I need enough to prove conspiracy and fraud. And I need it before that IPO announcement? No, what are you going to do? Tasha asked. I smiled at my reflection in the window. I looked like my mother in that moment, same sharp eyes, same determined expression. I'm going to take everything they tried to take from me. And then I'm going to take everything else too. That night, I made 3 calls. The first was to my own lawyer, not the family attorney Julian and I shared, but a bulldog litigator I'd met at a fundraiser who specialized in complex fraud cases. The second was to a forensic accountant who'd helped a friend untangle her ex-husband's hidden assets. The third was to my financial advisor with instructions to freeze my family trust and create a new entity that Julian couldn't touch, no matter what papers he filed. Then I went downstairs and made dinner. Julian came home at 8, later than usual, and I could see the guilt in his eyes when he kissed me. He was probably meeting with lawyers, finalizing the timeline for serving me with papers right after the IPO announcement. He was probably feeling bad about it, justifying it to himself as necessary for his business, for our future. Maybe even telling himself I'd be fine with my little lifestyle brand and the settlement he considered generous. "How was your day?" I asked, handing him a glass of wine. "Long," he said, and at least that was honest. "Lots of meetings about the IPO. It's exciting," I said warmly. "You must be so proud of what you've built." He looked surprised that I knew about the IPO, then tried to cover it. "Yeah, it's been years of work. I was going to tell you about the public announcement, but I didn't want to jinx it. Claire." But I just smiled and said, "I can't wait to celebrate with you when it happens. This is going to change everything for our family." "It really is," he agreed, and he actually looked emotional. He thought he was about to become a billionaire while I remained clueless about what he'd taken from me. He had no idea that in 2 weeks, when those papers were supposed to be filed, he'd be the one losing everything. We ate dinner. We talked about Ana's upcoming school play. We discussed whether to spend Christmas in Aspen or Maui. We were a perfect couple in a perfect home, living a perfect lie. And the entire time, I was thinking about how my mother had taught me to play chess. How she'd told me the key to winning wasn't the pieces you took, but the moves your opponent never saw coming. After Julian fell asleep, I went back to my office and spent 4 hours going through every document my lawyer had sent over. The fake divorce papers weren't just forgeries. They were elaborate fakes that had been filed in a real court system. which meant someone with access had put them there. Someone had pulled strings, called in favors, maybe even paid bribes. This wasn't just Julian and my mother. This was a network of people who'd all conspired to defraud me. But they'd made mistakes. The therapy records used a dead woman's signature. The notarization had timestamp errors. The case filing had been backdated. But the metadata on the electronic documents showed they'd actually been created last month. Every mistake was small, the kind of thing that would be overlooked in a typical divorce. But I wasn't going to let this be typical. I was building a case for criminal fraud, and I had 11 days to make it airtight. The next morning, my mother called. "Darling, we should have lunch this week. I barely saw you at Anna's party. Are you free Thursday?" Her voice was warm, affectionate, exactly the way it always sounded. If I hadn't known what I knew, I would have said yes immediately, pleased that she wanted to spend time with me. But now I heard the calculation behind the warmth. The way she was checking in to make sure I was still unaware, still controllable. Still the soft daughter who didn't have the stomach for real warfare. "Thursday is perfect," I said, matching her tone exactly. "Shall we meet at your club? Actually, let's do somewhere new. There's a lovely French place in Hayes Valley I've been wanting to try." 1:00. She didn't want to meet at her usual place where people knew her, where our conversation might be overheard. She was being careful. Good. That meant she was worried about something. "Sounds wonderful," I said. "I'll see you then." I hung up and immediately called my lawyer. "I need to wear a wire to lunch with my mother on Thursday. Is that legal in California?" "California is a two-party consent state for recording conversations," she said carefully. "But there are exceptions for gathering evidence of ongoing criminal activity. Given what you've told me about the fraud, I'd say you have grounds. Let me file for a protective order and get you set up properly." Thursday came. I dressed carefully, Stella McCartney dress, Cartier watch. The diamond studs Julian had given me for our 5th anniversary. I looked like exactly what I was supposed to be. A wealthy woman with no idea her life was being stolen. The wire was so small and sophisticated that even if my mother hugged me, she wouldn't feel it. The restaurant was expensive and quiet. It's the kind of place where conversations about destroying people's lives could happen over perfectly. Seared duck breast and glasses of burgundy. My mother was already there when I arrived, looking elegant in a cream blazer, her signature pearls at her throat. She stood and kissed my cheek, and I felt nothing but cold rage wrapped in a smile. We ordered. We made small talk about Anna, about my business, about the upcoming election season. My mother complained about a colleague on the appropriations committee. I sympathized. We were two women who loved each other, having lunch, sharing our lives. The people at nearby tables probably thought we looked close. Then, when the main course arrived, my mother leaned forward slightly and said, "Darling, I need to talk to you about something serious. It's about Julian." My heart was pounding, but I kept my expression neutral, concerned. "What about Julian?" "I've been worried about you too," she said, her voice dropping to that intimate register she used when sharing confidences. "I know you think everything is fine, but I've noticed some things. The way he's been distant, the long hours, the stress about the company. I'm concerned he might be struggling with the marriage." Shh. She was setting up the narrative, planting the seeds so that when the divorce papers were filed, I'd believe Julian had been unhappy for months and my mother had tried to warn me. It was masterful manipulation, delivered with perfect maternal concern. "I think we're okay," I said carefully. "But thank you for caring. Paige, I'm your mother. I'll always care." She reached across the table and took my hand. "And that's why I want you to be prepared. If something does happen with your marriage, Julian does decide he wants something different, I need you to know that you'll be fine. You're strong. You have your business. You have Anna. You don't need him." "Are you saying Julian wants a divorce?" I asked, letting my voice shake just slightly. "I'm saying I think you should protect yourself," my mother said gently. "Maybe talk to a lawyer. Maybe make sure your assets are separate. Just in case." She was trying to get me to file for divorce myself, probably with a lawyer she'd recommend. probably with terms that would benefit Julian's timeline. She wanted me to think I was protecting myself while actually walking straight into their trap. "Mom," I said, and I let tears fill my eyes. "Is there something you're not telling me? Do you know something about Julian?" She squeezed my hand. "I just know that marriages are complicated, especially when there's money involved. And when his company goes public next week, there's going to be a lot of money involved." There it was. She'd told me about the IPO, probably thinking I was too naive to understand the implications. Probably hoping I'd panic and do something stupid that would make her job easier. She'd miscalculated badly. "I had no idea it was happening so soon," I said, wiping my eyes. "Julian hasn't told me anything." "Exactly," my mother said softly. "And that should tell you something, shouldn't it?" We finished lunch. My mother paid the bill unusual for her. Another sign she was managing the interaction carefully. She hugged me goodbye and told me to call if I needed anything. She was playing the role of supportive mother so perfectly that if I hadn't known the truth, I would have left that restaurant grateful for her concern instead of planning her destruction. I went straight to my lawyer's office and handed over the recording. She listened to it twice, taking notes, and then looked up at me with something like awe in her eyes. She confessed to prior knowledge of the IPO and to conspiring to manipulate you into filing for divorce. This is evidence of fraud and conspiracy. Combined with everything else we have, this is enough to file criminal charges." "Not yet," I said. "I want to wait until right before the IPO. I want to make sure they can't undo any of this." "That's risky," my lawyer warned. "If they file their fake papers first, they won't," I interrupted. "They're waiting until after the IPO to protect Julian's shares from volatility. They think they have time. They're wrong." I spent the next week preparing for war. My forensic accountant found evidence that Julian had been moving assets into hidden accounts for months. My lawyer compiled a comprehensive case documenting every piece of fraud, every forged signature, every illegal filing. Tasha wrote an expose about political corruption and family betrayal, ready to publish the moment I gave her the word. And I played my role. I was the loving wife, the devoted mother, the woman who had no idea her world was about to explode. I went to Anna's school play and cheered loudly. I approved Julian's birthday dinner reservations. I confirmed holiday plans with my mother. I posted pretty pictures on Instagram of our beautiful life. But at night, alone in my office, I was building the case that would destroy them both. The IPO announcement came on a Tuesday morning. Julian's company stock opened at $70 a share and immediately jumped to $90. By noon, it was at $110. Julian called me from his office, his voice shaking with excitement. "Paige, we did it. We're billionaires. I asked softly. There was a pause. A long, telling pause. Then he said, "Of course, this is our success, our family's future." "So wonderful, honey," I said. "We should celebrate tonight. Why don't you come home early?" "I can't," he said quickly. "There are a million things to handle. Tomorrow night, I promise. We'll do something special." Tomorrow night he was planning to have me served with divorce papers. Tomorrow night he thought he'd be celebrating stealing $1 billion from his wife. He had no idea that tomorrow night he'd be explaining everything to federal investigators. That evening I made one final call to my lawyer. "File everything," I said. "Criminal complaints for fraud and conspiracy. Civil suits for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. Restraining orders to freeze all assets. And send copies to the SEC, the DA's office, and every financial reporter in San Francisco." "You're sure?" she asked. I thought about the teddy bear, about Anna's confused face, about the months of lies and manipulation. I thought about my mother taking money to betray her own daughter. I thought about Julian planning to steal billions while I made him birthday dinners. "I'm absolutely sure," I said. "Burn it all down." The next morning, I woke up before dawn and did something I hadn't done in years. I went for a run. Not on my Peloton in our home gym, but outside, through the empty streets of Pacific Heights, watching the city wake up. The fog was rolling in from the bay, and everything looked soft and unreal, like I was moving through a dream. In 12 hours, my entire life would detonate. In 12 hours, everyone would know what I'd discovered. But in that moment, running through the quiet morning, I felt more myself than I had in months. I got home at 6 and made breakfast for Anna, scrambled eggs and toast cut into triangles, the way she liked. She came downstairs in her pajamas, sleepy and sweet, and climbed into my lap while we waited for the eggs to cool. "Mommy, can Grandma come over this weekend?" she asked. "I want to show her my new drawing." My heart broke a little. Anna had no idea that her grandmother had tried to destroy her mother. She just knew that Grandma sent nice presents and smiled a lot and sometimes brought fancy cookies when she visited. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that the people who are supposed to love you can also be the ones who hurt you most? "Maybe not this weekend, baby," I said, kissing her hair. "Grandma is going to be very busy." Julian came down at 7, already dressed for the office, checking his phone constantly. The stock was still climbing. His company was now valued at $9 billion. He was probably doing math in his head, calculating exactly how rich he was about to be once the divorce went through. He kissed the top of my head absently and grabbed a coffee to go. "Big day?" I asked innocently. "The biggest," he said, and he actually smiled at me, warm and genuine. He thought we were celebrating together tonight. He thought I was still the trusting wife who believed his lies. "I'll try to be home by 7. We'll open that bottle of Chateau Margaux we've been saving." "Can't wait," I said. And I meant it, though not for the reasons he thought. After Julian left and Anna was picked up by her nanny for school, I went upstairs and got dressed for the day that would change everything. I chose a powersuit navy blue Armani, crisp white blouse. My mother's signature pearls that she'd given me when I graduated law school. I wanted to look like her when I destroyed her. I wanted her to see exactly where I'd learned how to fight. At 8 o'clock, my lawyer called. The criminal complaints were filed an hour ago. The DA's office is taking it seriously. They're assigning it to their white-collar crime division. The restraining orders freezing assets were approved. And the SEC is opening an investigation into potential securities fraud related to the timing of the divorce filing and the IPO. "What about the press?" I asked. "Tasha's story goes live at 9. I've already gotten calls from 3 other outlets asking for comment. This is going to be everywhere by noon." I sat down on the edge of my bed and took a deep breath. This was it. The moment everything became real and public and irreversible. Once this story broke, there was no going back, no quiet settlement, no way to pretend it hadn't happened. My marriage would be over. My relationship with my mother would be destroyed. My private life would become public entertainment for everyone who loved watching wealthy families tear themselves apart. But Anna would be protected. The truth would be documented. And the people who'd tried to steal from me would face consequences. "Let it run," I told my lawyer. "All of it." At 9:03, my phone started ringing. First my mother, then Julian, then friends, then business partners, then reporters I'd never met. I ignored all of them and went down to my office. Tasha's story was already the top headline on the Chronicle's website. Senator's daughter uncovers billion-dollar fraud. How a teddy bear exposed a conspiracy to steal a fortune. The story had everything. The fake divorce papers stuffed in a child's birthday gift. The forged therapy records using a dead woman's identity. The conspiracy between a tech billionaire and a state senator to defraud the billionaire's wife before a massive IPO. The paper trails showing months of planning and coordination. Tasha had even found the consultant payments from Julian's company to my mother's shell corporation, complete with bank records and emails discussing the project. It was detailed. It was damning. And it was completely true. My phone kept ringing. I turned it off. Instead, I opened my laptop and watched the story spread. Twitter was exploding with reactions. LinkedIn was full of people in tech discussing Julian's ethics. Political blogs were analyzing whether my mother would survive the scandal. The stock price of Julian's company started dropping as investors panicked about potential securities violations and fraud charges. At 10 o'clock, there was pounding on my front door. I looked at the security camera and saw Julian, his face pale and furious. I didn't let him in. Instead, I used the intercom system. You need to leave, I said calmly. My lawyer has filed a restraining order. If you don't leave immediately, I'll call the police. Paige, please, just let me explain, he said, and he actually sounded desperate. It's not what you think. Your mother said you'd understand. She said this was better for everyone. My mother lied to you, I interrupted. Just like you lied to me. The difference is, I have proof of everything. Every forged document, every illegal payment, every conspiracy to commit fraud. It's all documented. It's all filed with law enforcement. And it's all public now. You're destroying me, he said, and his voice cracked. The stock is plummeting. The SEC is freezing my accounts. The board is talking about removing me. You're going to cost me everything. No, I said quietly. You cost yourself everything when you decided to steal from your wife instead of just, being honest about the IPO. You could have told me the truth. You could have renegotiated our prenup fairly. But you chose fraud instead. You chose to work with my mother to gaslight me and forge documents and build a legal case based on lies. You made this bed, Julian. Now you get to lie in it. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the camera, and I could see him processing the magnitude of what he'd lost. Not just the money, though that was substantial. Not just his company, though that was probably gone too. But his reputation, his freedom potentially, and definitely his family. What about Anna? He finally asked. You're going to keep her from me. No, I said, and I meant it. You're still her father. But we're going to do this properly now. With real lawyers, real custody agreements, and real honesty. And if you ever lied to her the way you lied to me, if you ever tried to manipulate her or use her, I will make what I did to you this week look like a gentle warning. Do you understand? He nodded slowly. Then he turned and walked back to his car, shoulders slumped. The golden boy who'd thought he could steal billions and get away with it. Because his wife was too soft and too trusting to fight back. He'd been wrong about that. Catastrophically wrong. My mother was harder to deal with. She didn't come to the house. She didn't call she knew I wouldn't answer. Instead, she went on the offensive, releasing a statement through her publicist claiming she'd been trying to protect me from a financially abusive marriage and that she'd worked with Julian only to ensure I'd be taken care of in case of divorce. It was brilliant spin, turning her conspiracy into maternal concern. Making herself the hero of a story where she was actually the villain. But I'd planned for this too. My lawyer released our counter statement within an hour, along with selected excerpts from the wire recording of our lunch. My mother's own words captured on tape, showing how she'd tried to manipulate me into filing for divorce myself. How she'd known about the IPO timeline. How she'd been coordinating with Julian to defraud me before the stock went public. The statement included documentation of the consulting payments she'd received from Julian's company. Showing this wasn't about protecting MIT, was about profit. The political fallout was immediate. My mother's colleagues in the state Senate started calling for an ethics investigation. Her major donors released statements expressing concern and disappointment. The press that had loved her for decades turned on her viciously, the way they always do when powerful women show any vulnerability. By noon, there were calls for her resignation. I watched it all unfold from my office, feeling nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, not even anger anymore. Just a cold, clear awareness that I'd done what needed to be done. I'd protected myself and my daughter. I'd exposed the truth. I'd made sure there would be consequences for the people who'd tried to destroy me. But I'd also destroyed my family in the process. That afternoon, while Anna was still at school, I did something I hadn't done since college. I cried. Not delicate tears that could be quickly wiped away, but deep, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for the marriage I'd thought I had, the mother I'd thought I knew. The life I'd built that had turned out to be made of lies and manipulation. I cried for Anna, who was about to learn that her family was broken in ways that couldn't be fixed. I cried for myself, the girl who'd learned at her mother's knee how to destroy people and had never wanted to use those lessons on the people she loved. When I was done crying, I washed my face, fixed my makeup, and went to pick up Anna from school myself instead of sending the nanny. She came running out of her classroom with a painting she'd made stick figures of our family, all holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "Look, Mommy, it's us." I held the painting and felt my heart crack open again. "It's beautiful, baby. Should we hang it in your room?" "Yes, and we can show Daddy and Grandma when they come over." I knelt down so I was at her level. "Anna, honey, I need to talk to you about some changes in our family. Daddy and I are going to live in different houses for a while. You'll still see him all the time, and he loves you so much. But things are going to be different." Her face fell. "Because you're mad at each other. Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," I said carefully. "And when that happens, they need to figure things out. But none of this is your fault. And both Daddy and I love you more than anything in the world. That part will never change." She thought about this seriously, her little face scrunched up with concentration. Then she said, "Is it because of the weird teddy bear Grandma sent?" "Out of the mouths of children. Kind of," I admitted. "But it's complicated, and you don't need to worry about it. Your job is just to be 6 and play and learn and be happy. The grown-up stuff is for grown-ups to handle." That night, I made Anna's favorite dinner mac and cheese with chicken nuggets, shaped like dinosaurs, and we ate in front of the TV watching a Disney movie. Something we almost never did because I had rules about screen time and family dinners. But rules didn't seem to matter much anymore. Everything I thought was important, the perfect home, its perfect image, the perfect family had been revealed as meaningless. What mattered was that Anna felt safe and loved, even as her world shifted beneath her feet. After she went to bed, I finally turned my phone back on. Hundreds of messages. Most from reporters and curiosity seekers, but some from friends offering support. A few from colleagues saying they'd always suspected Julian was shady. One from my college roommate, Tasha, saying simply, "You're a warrior. I'm proud of you." And one from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You've made powerful enemies. Watch your back." I forwarded the text to my lawyer and to the police detective who'd been assigned to the fraud case. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my couch overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, and thought about what came next. The criminal investigation took 3 months. The DA's office interviewed everyone: me, Julian, my mother. The lawyers who'd filed the fake papers. The notary who'd notarized documents she'd never actually witnessed. The therapist who worked in Dr. Wong's old office and swore she'd never created records for me. They subpoenaed emails and bank records and phone logs. They built a comprehensive case showing conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and identity theft. Julian took a plea deal. He admitted to conspiracy and agreed to pay a massive fine and accept a fair division of assets in our divorce. In exchange, he avoided prison time but had to step down as CEO of his company. The board replaced him within a week. The stock never recovered to its opening day high. My mother fought harder. She hired expensive lawyers and claimed she'd been misled by Julian, that she'd thought she was helping her daughter escape a bad marriage, that the consulting payments were legitimate political strategy work. But the wire recording from our lunch destroyed that defense. Her own words proved she'd known exactly what she was doing. She was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and accepting illegal payments. She resigned from the state Senate rather than face an ethics hearing that would have been public and humiliating. She took a plea deal to accepting 3 years of probation and a substantial fine. No prison time because she was wealthy and white and had good lawyers. But her political career was over. The divorce took longer than the criminal case. Even with Julian's plea deal, there were billions of dollars to untangle, custody arrangements to negotiate, properties to divide. My lawyers were excellent. Julian's lawyers were desperate. We settled after 8 months of negotiation. I got half of everything, exactly what I would have been entitled to if Julian had been honest from the start. Half the house, half the investments, half his company's stock. It came to roughly $1.2 billion after the stock price decline and all the legal fees. Enough to never worry about money again. Enough to make sure Anna's future was secure. Enough to build whatever life I wanted next. Julian got generous visitation with Anna every other weekend, Wednesday dinners, holidays, alternating years. I didn't try to take her from him completely, even though I probably could have based on his fraud. He was still her father. She deserved to know him, even if I no longer trusted him. But the custody agreement included strict provisions about honesty and transparency. If he lied to her about anything significant, I could petition to modify the arrangement. My mother I cut off completely. No contact, no visits with Anna, nothing. She sent letters that I returned unopened. She tried to show up at Anna's school once, and I had security escort her away. She'd made her choice when she took Julian's money to betray me. She didn't get to claim a relationship with her granddaughter after trying to destroy her mother. People asked if I regretted it going public, prosecuting my own mother, destroying my marriage so completely instead of trying to work things out privately. The answer was always no. They'd committed crimes. They'd conspired to defraud me of $1 billion and gaslight me in the process. There was no working it out with people who'd do that. But there were costs beyond the obvious ones. My lifestyle brand suffered. People loved buying aspirational products from women with perfect lives. Not from women whose families had imploded in a fraud scandal. I sold the company to a larger firm at a loss and started something new. Something more honest, a legal advocacy organization, helping women untangle financial abuse in high-net-worth divorces. It made less money but mattered more. The social costs were harder. Some friends stuck by me. Others drifted away, uncomfortable with the ugliness of it all, or worried that being associated with me would tarnish their own carefully curated images. Dinner party invitations dried up. My name was whispered about at charity events. I was both famous and infamous, the woman who'd taken down her own family, depending on who was telling the story. But slowly, over the next year, I rebuilt. A different kind of life, but one that felt more real. I sold the Pacific Heights house to many memories. Too much pretense, and bought a smaller place in Noah Valley with a garden where Anna could play. I made new friends, mostly other divorced women who understood that sometimes you had to blow up your life to save yourself. I started therapy, real therapy this time, processing everything I'd been through. Anna adjusted better than I expected. Kids are resilient in ways adults forget. She saw Julian regularly and seemed to accept that Mommy and Daddy just lived in different houses now. It's like several of her friends' parents. She asked about Grandma less and less as time passed. She made art about our new normal stick figures in 2 separate houses, both with flowers and sunshine. It was sad, but it was honest. And I learned things I needed to learn. That control is an illusion. That trust has to be earned, not assumed. That the people who are supposed to love you can also hurt you deeply. And that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set boundaries and walk away. That being soft doesn't mean being weak, and that being strong sometimes looks like crying in your closet and then standing up and filing criminal charges against your own mother. 18 months after Anna's 6th birthday party, I was sitting in my new garden watching her play when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I'd stopped being scared of unknown numbers. I answered. Ms. Sutton. This is Detective Rivera. I wanted to let you know that the investigation into your mother's case is officially closed. She's completed her probation successfully. I also wanted to tell you that your case helped us identify a pattern. We've opened investigations into 3 other similar frauds, wealthy men working with family members to defraud their wives before major financial events. Your courage in coming forward may help other women. After I hung up, I sat there thinking about that word, courage. I'd never thought of myself as particularly courageous. I'd just done what needed to be done when I found those papers in the teddy bear. But maybe that was what courage was, not some grand heroic gesture. But just refusing to accept injustice even when standing up to it cost you everything comfortable and familiar. Anna ran over grass stains on her knees, holding a dandelion she'd picked. Make a wish, Mommy. I closed my eyes and blew the seeds into the wind, watching them scatter across the garden. I didn't wish for my old life back, the big house, the perfect marriage, the influential mother. I didn't wish for Julian to be different or for my mother to apologize. I wished for something simpler and harder to achieve: peace. The ability to move forward without bitterness. The wisdom to teach Anna that love and trust are precious gifts that should never be weaponized. The strength to keep building a life based on honesty instead of image. When I opened my eyes, Anna was watching me seriously. "What did you wish for?" "I can't tell you, or it won't come true," I said, pulling her into my lap. "But I can tell you something else. You know how sometimes in stories the princess has to fight a dragon or escape a tower?" "Yeah," Anna said, snuggling against me. "Like in my books. Well, sometimes in real life, the hard part isn't fighting the dragon. It's realizing that the dragon is someone you loved, someone you thought would protect you. And when that happens, you have to be brave enough to protect yourself instead." She thought about this, her little face serious. "Did you have to fight a dragon, Mommy?" "I did," I said honestly, "and it was really hard. But you know what I learned? That I was strong enough to do it. And that even when hard things happen, we can build something new and good afterward. Like this garden. Like our new house. Like us. I like our new house," Anna said contentedly. "It's cozier than the old one. And you're happier here." Out of the mouths of children again. She was right. I was happier. Poorer by some measures, we had one house instead of three. A Toyota instead of a Tesla. A nanny 3 days a week instead of full-time staff. But richer in the ways that actually mattered. I knew who I was now. I knew what I was capable of. I knew the difference between the appearance of love and the reality of it. That evening, after Anna was asleep, I did something I'd been avoiding for 18 months. I wrote a letter to my mother. Not to send, I had no intention of breaking my no-contact boundary, but for myself to process everything I needed to say. "Mom," I wrote, "I've spent a lot of time wondering why you did it. Was it really just for the money Julian paid you? Was it because you never forgave me for choosing my own path instead of yours? Was it some twisted belief that you were protecting me from something? I'll probably never know, because you'll never tell me the truth. But here's what I've realized. It doesn't matter why. You made a choice to betray your own daughter for profit. You forged documents, committed fraud, and tried to steal my child and my financial future. The why behind that is less important than the what. And the what is unforgivable. I used to think I wasn't strong enough to stand up to you. You taught me so well how to navigate around powerful people, how to smile and compromise and pick my battles. You never taught me how to recognize when the powerful person was you. And when the only winning move was to stop playing your game entirely. Cutting you out of my life wasn't revenge. It was self-preservation. It was choosing myself and Anna over the illusion of family. It was recognizing that blood doesn't excuse betrayal, and that sometimes the most loving thing a mother can do for her daughter is model self-respect. I hope you've learned something from this. I hope you've developed the capacity for genuine remorse. But even if you haven't, I'm going to be okay. Better than okay. I'm going to build a life based on honesty and teach my daughter that she never has to accept mistreatment. Even from people who claim to love her. That's your legacy, Mom, not political power or social status, but a daughter who learned from your mistakes how not to be. I filed the letter away in a box with all the legal documents. The news clippings, the evidence of everything that had happened. Someday, when Anna was older, I'd show it all to her. I'd tell her the whole story, not to turn her against her father or grandmother, but so she'd understand that families can be complicated, that love doesn't excuse harm, and that sometimes you have to fight the people who are supposed to protect you. But for now, she was 6, soon to be 7, and she deserved to just be a kid. 2 years after the teddy bear birthday, I was invited to speak at a women's legal conference about financial fraud and divorce. I almost said no. I'd built a quiet life and didn't particularly want to be back in the spotlight. But then I thought about what Detective Rivera had said about how my case had helped other investigations. I thought about all the women out there who might be living my old life, trusting husbands and family members who were secretly plotting against them. I said yes. The conference was in Los Angeles at a hotel in Century City. 200 women lawyers, financial advisors, and advocates filled the ballroom. I stood at the podium in another power suit, another set of pearls, and told them everything. The teddy bear, the fake documents, the conspiracy, the decision to go public, the fallout. And at the end, I told them this. I was lucky. I found those papers before they were officially filed. I had resources to hire excellent lawyers. I had a friend in journalism who could tell my story. But most women won't be that lucky. Most women won't find out until it's too late, until the papers are filed and the damage is done. That's why we need systems to catch this kind of fraud earlier. That's why we need better protections for women in high-set divorces. That's why we need to stop assuming that wealthy families are somehow above this kind of abuse. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping, and then everyone was standing, applauding. And I realized I was crying again, not sad tears this time, but something more complicated. Relief, maybe, that I'd turned my nightmare into something that might help others. Pride that I'd survived and come out stronger. Gratitude that I'd had the courage to fight when it would have been easier to just accept what they tried to do to me afterward. Women came up to me with their own stories. A tech executive whose husband had hidden stock options. A doctor whose ex had forged her signature on refinancing documents. A CEO whose father had tried to force her out of her own company. We exchanged business cards and phone numbers. We promised to support each other. We built the network that should have existed all along. That night, back in my hotel room, I video called Anna. She was at Julian's house for his weekend. And she showed me the science project they'd been working on together, a volcano made of clay and painted to look realistic. Julian appeared briefly in the background, waving. We were civil now. Not friends, never that again, but functional co-parents who could attend school events without drama. I'm proud of your volcano, I told Anna. You worked really hard on it. Daddy helped, she said generously. He's good at science stuff. He is, I agreed, because it was true and because I'd decided I wouldn't poison her. Relationship with her father, even though he'd tried to destroy me. That was a gift I could give her that my mother had never given me. Permission to love imperfect people while still protecting herself from their worst instincts. After we hung up, I stood at my hotel window looking out at the Los Angeles skyline, lights sparkling against the dark. Somewhere out there were women going through what I'd gone through, finding evidence of betrayal, making the choice between silence and justice. Somewhere out there were men planning frauds, thinking their wives were too soft or too trusting or too dependent to fight back. Somewhere out there were mothers betraying daughters, husbands betraying wives, families destroying each other for money and power and control. But somewhere out there were also women choosing themselves. Women filing complaints and hiring lawyers and refusing to accept mistreatment. Women supporting each other, sharing resources, building networks of protection. Women who'd learned, as I had, that sometimes love means walking away, and that strength sometimes looks like crying in your closet and then standing up and fighting for yourself. I thought about the teddy bear, about how such a small thing had exposed such massive betrayal. I thought about how close I'd come to never finding those papers, to living out the plot my mother and Julian had created for me, to losing everything while thinking I was loved and protected. The randomness of it terrified me. What if Anna hadn't opened that particular present when she did? What if I hadn't looked closely at what was inside? But she had, and I had. And now I was here 2 years later, building a life I'd chosen instead of one that had been chosen for me. It wasn't the life I'd imagined when I married Julian, when I started my business, when I posed for those Architectural Digest photos and my perfect Pacific Heights home. But it was real in a way that life had never been. It was mine. The next morning, before my flight back to San Francisco, I went for a run along the beach in Santa Monica. The sun was coming up over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Other runners nodded at me as they passed. A woman was doing yoga on the sand. Surfers were paddling out to catch early waves. Life just continuing, beautiful and ordinary and real. I thought about Anna's 7th birthday coming up in a few months. This time there would be no elaborate party with petting zoos and custom cakes. Just a small gathering with real friends, the people who'd stuck by us through everything. Simple decorations, homemade cake, presents that came from love instead of manipulation. And absolutely no teddy bears. When I got back to San Francisco that afternoon, Anna was waiting at my door with Julian, ready to transition back to my custody. She ran to me and wrapped her arms around my waist. "I missed you, Mommy." "I missed you too, baby," I said, holding her tight. Julian and I did the awkward handoff choreography we'd perfected. Dana's backpack, her homework folder, a note about a dentist appointment next week. He looked tired but no longer desperate. He'd found a new position at a smaller tech company, had an apartment in Soma, was dating someone I'd heard was nice. He'd survived his fall from grace. We both had. "She did great this weekend," he said. "We went to the Academy of Sciences. She loved the rainforest exhibit." "Thank you for taking her," I said, and I meant it. Whatever else Julian had done, he was trying to be a good father now. That had to count for something. After he left, Anna and I went inside our cozy house in Noah Valley. She ran up to her room to play, and I stood in my kitchen, my actual kitchen. Not a showpiece for magazine photos and made tea. Through the window, I could see the garden we'd planted together, vegetables and flowers growing in cheerful chaos. It wasn't manicured or perfect or Instagram-worthy. It was just ours. My phone buzzed with an email from a woman who'd been at the conference yesterday. She was going through her own high-net-worth divorce and had found suspicious documents. Could I recommend a lawyer? Did I have time to talk? Would I be willing to look at what she'd found? I wrote back, yes, yes, and yes. Because this was the work now, not building a perfect life that looked good from the outside, but helping women protect themselves when the lives they'd built turned out to be built on lies. Using what I'd learned, what I'd survived, to make sure other women didn't have to face it alone. That evening, I tucked Anna into bed, and she asked me to tell her a story. Not a book one from my head. So I told her about a princess who lived in a beautiful castle that turned out to be made of glass. When the castle shattered, the princess was scared at first. But then she realized she could see clearly for the first time in years. And she built herself a new home, smaller but stronger, made of brick and stone and truth. It wasn't as shiny as the glass castle, but it was real. And she was happier there than she'd ever been in all her glass palace glory. "Is that you, Mommy?" Anna asked sleepily. "Are you the princess?" "Maybe," I said, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "Or maybe it's just a story about how sometimes things have to fall apart before you can build something better." "I like the brick house better too," she murmured, eyes closing. "Glass breaks too easy." After she fell asleep, I went downstairs and opened my laptop. There were messages from 3 more women who'd heard about my case, all asking for advice or help or just someone who understood. I answered each one carefully, offering resources, recommending lawyers, sharing what I'd learned. This was my legacy now. Not the lifestyle brand or the perfect Instagram feed or the senator's daughter story or the tech billionaire's wife narrative. Just this helping women protect themselves. Teaching them the lessons I'd learned too late. Making sure the next generation of daughters knew how to recognize manipulation even when it came wrapped in love. The teddy bear sat on a shelf in my office, carefully preserved as evidence that had eventually been returned to me. I'd thought about throwing it away 100 times, but I kept it as a reminder that truth can be hidden in the most innocent-looking packages, that betrayal can come from the people you trust most, and that paying attention to what seems wrong can save your entire life. Anna never asked about it anymore. For her, it was just a weird thing that happened when she was 6. Overshadowed now by her current interest, science experiments and art projects and playground politics, she was growing up strong and honest, learning that family could be complicated and that love didn't mean accepting mistreatment. She was learning the lessons I'd had to learn the hard way, but earlier when they could shape who she became instead of who she had to rebuild herself to be. Late that night, after all my work was done, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my garden under the stars. It was cool and quiet, the city lights visible in the distance, but far enough away that I could hear crickets and wind in the trees. This small space, this honest life, This hard-won peace, it was mine in a way the Pacific Heights penthouse had never been. My phone buzzed one more time. A message from Tasha Coffee tomorrow. Want to hear about the conference? I smiled and texted back, absolutely. 10 a.m. at our usual place. Perfect. Proud of you, by the way. I set my phone down and looked up at the stars, thinking about that word again. Proud. I was proud of myself, too. Proud that I'd fought back. Proud that I'd survived. Proud that I'd turned my pain into purpose. Proud that I'd protected my daughter and helped other women and refused to let betrayal destroy me. The glass castle had shattered, but I'd built something better from the pieces, not a palace or a showpiece or a carefully constructed illusion, but a real home with strong walls and honest foundations. A place where my daughter could grow up knowing that truth matters more than appearances. That courage sometimes looks like saying no to people who want to control you. And that the strongest thing you can ever do is protect yourself even when it costs you everything comfortable and familiar. 2 years after a teddy bear full of lies arrived at my daughter's birthday party, I was finally genuinely free. Not because I'd gotten revenge or won in court or made people pay for what they'd done to me, though all of those things had happened, but because I'd learned the lesson that would define the rest of my life, that nobody gets to write my story but me. That family is who protects you, not who hurts you. And that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who don't deserve you and build something new from nothing but hope and determination and the belief that you deserve better. Anna was safe. I was strong. The truth was told. Justice was served. And every morning when I woke up in my cozy brick house with my daughter sleeping peacefully down the hall, I knew I'd made the right choice. Not the easy choice, never that, but the right one. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Take a second to comment your city or country. I read every message. Don't forget to subscribe for more real and powerful stories coming soon. I'll see you in the next one. Stay brave and keep moving forward.